I'm Gideon from the Burning Veil podcast, and you are listening to The Infinite Rabbit Hole. Keep it up, guys. You're doing a great job.
Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Jeff. Today, we're doing a redo because the first time we did it didn't work. So we're doing a round two. We're going to kind of pretend like we don't know what they're talking about, but also not really because there's a lot of info. So I want to know more. But before we introduce who we're talking to and what we're talking about, let's introduce the co-hosts. We will start ladies first. Kid, what is up? How are you?
Oh, I thought you were actually going to introduce Jake first. Sorry.
Damn.
Sorry.
Shots fired.
Sorry, I felt like being a bully today. Jake said he was a bully when I jumped on here, so I figured I'd give his medicine back to him.
Karma.
Wow, you're real mean. You're just a mean lady.
Well, what's up, Jake? How do you feel about that?
Well, my back already hurt, so I got this heating pad on it, but now my heart hurts. So, I'll recover.
My back hurts too.
My pride was hurting last.
I love you, Jake.
Last time we recorded this, I know. Yeah, it was funny. So we had the take one, right? And Dan, one of our guests here, was talking about how Zencastr sometimes will just drop all your stuff and crap itself and stuff. And then I was like, no, there's, no way, Zencastr's been great for us and stuff. And literally that episode, it crapped out and dropped all of Dan's audio. So here we are recording it again. So yeah, pride hurts, back hurts.
I love Zencastr.
Click your heels together 3 times and say, I love Zencastr while looking in the mirror.
Whisper sweet nothings.
Yes, but so speaking of this, the topic we're doing, we're not covering shit. We're listening to a couple other people tell us about the Bock Saga, and those couple other people are my good friends Danunaki Dan, and Andy from the Deep Share podcast. Dan's from the Rising from the Ashes podcast, and you guys have like 10,000 other podcasts. But what is up, gentlemen?
How's it going, man? Thanks for
I
having us again.
I hardly have any.
Yes, welcome back.
I don't either, really. I mean,
Horns
it was
up.
starting to happen, and then I got in control of the spider web.
That's good. Good move. I'm juggling now with 3. It's like, oh shit. But
yeah, me and Andy just
our
do
other
the
show
deep
with Jeff
chill.
Horns Up.
Yeah, we do Horns Up, and then our regular shows.
Aficionados.
Yeah. Just a good show.
Professionals.
We try.
I like it. So most people are probably gonna be like, what did he say we're talking about? Bock Saga?
Bock Saga.
BOCK.
Still don't know where to start with this. So I'm just gonna kind of lay this in front of you guys.
Yeah, I got a good intro going here. Basically it's an entire different history. It's one story about one family based on one sound system. And this sound system is called root language. And this root language spoken by these people, this story comes from Finland, tells the story of the human race according to this saga. And it's extremely intense. So that's just the intro, I guess. But yeah.
The hidden history of humanity.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, the roots of the inversion we see all the time. A lot of the word magic, word play, puns that we see pop up in a lot of topics. This seems to have that same behavior, but with a lot more magnitude behind it. The etymology of things.
So I was thinking about this a little bit earlier about how you guys might approach kind of talking about this in a way that's a little bit more digestible, right? Just from like what I've heard you guys talk about on other shows. I feel like when I hear you guys talk about the geography situation, right? Like the physical layout of the whole situation, like that's what clicked for me, and then it made the rest of the shit make sense.
Mhm.
But
You talk about the concentric rings and stuff
yeah,
like
like
that?
the rings and just like where, like how
Helsinki.
this, the physical aspect of it.
So the story goes through the time periods of Paradise Time and then Atlantis or Atlantis, which is the ice time, and then history. And in Paradise Time, the Earth was upright. It was before the tilt happened, supposedly. And this puts Helsinki at the very top of the world, but at that time it was called Hell. And it was 7 islands with an island in the middle. And it was all called Udenma, which is also the name of the sun, Uden. And so it was like the place of Uden. And this society was structured in concentric rings, very much like what we see in Atlantis folklore. And that makes sense because these ring cities in this story were all over the planet. In Paradise Time, the entire planet was tropical, experiencing good weather for growth and sustainable life. And up in the North Pole, where this society was taking place and where humanity was supposedly coming out of, which is called this place called the Acer. From there, I kind of lost my train of thought there. There's so much to it, but yeah, ask me some more questions.
So yeah,
I have a question.
Bro. Yeah, go
Yes.
shoot.
Is there any so I know that based off the different theories of like the flat earth or the hollow earth or whatever it is, some people have kind of tried to illustrate that. Is there any good illustrations that people can find online that would kind of explain this in a way? Anything that you've come across?
Unfortunately not, but I really am, because this comes up a lot and it's important, and I think a lot of people bring it up because it's important. I think I want to start trying to make some drawings of what this kind of looked like better for people, especially the different time period thing. The Paradise Time is one thing, and then you have Atlantis, or as they say in this story, Altlantis, all the land is ice, which is when the earth tilts. This is Ragnarok, the great destruction. And when this happens, the ice covers the northern hemisphere. All the lands are covered in ice, except for Udenma, which is no longer at the top of the planet anymore. But because of the Gulf Stream, they say, it kept all the waters in the Gulf of Finland warm and the air warm enough to create this, as they say, rosette, or this figure 8, which kept the water there, kept the air warm in this one place, creating this big unfrozen area where they were able to survive while the entire rest of the northern hemisphere was covered in ice.
Kind of like an oasis, but not in the desert.
Right. And Dan, you always go into the lands, like all the actual names of the countries now that we're talking about, to kind of give it a little bit more dimension here. I always forget like most of them at the time, but like Finland and England and Greenland.
I put a link in the chat notes so you guys can click on it. This is the Yggdrasil tree, and it shows like a world and with a tree, and then it shows you the rock in the middle, the tree of life coming out from that, and then you can see kind of like 4 rivers coming out from there, and you can see like a ring around in the inside, which is actually the Ouroboros. And then on the outside of that Yggdrasil image, you see a big ice wall. And so this is kind of a pretty close example, I would say, of what Udenma looked like during the ice time, because it was surrounded by this ice wall, and it was called Altland East because all land was ice. So Ireland, Scotland, England, Daneland, Poland, all the lands surrounding this area were all covered in ice. So they got trapped in this area. They couldn't get out of there. But inside of the ice, it's not like frozen inside. It's still livable habitat, but they're also, digging tunnels
now. Yeah.
and they're going underground too. I'm sure certain time periods or certain times of the year were probably a lot worse than others. I don't necessarily know that exactly, but
well, the story kind of concludes that Atlantis, that time period, created the Arctic people along with the just like the Arctic animals, like the dark tropical skin turned white, it would lost the melanin, and blue eyes and green eyes, blonde hair, red hair came in, and the Caucasian race was born according to this saga. And then, of course, we connected to the next disaster, which is when the ice starts to recede. And they don't necessarily talk about the melting of the ice, but they talk about the ice scraping across the surface of the earth. So it was like moving south, and it destroys Udenma again, which is interesting because just that play on words, Helsinki. This place was known as Hell, and it sunk. And this is also an interesting reference to a lot of the stories you hear about Atlantis. Even when you get into like the woo-woo, when people are like channeling and fucking having past life regression back to like, oh, I was at Atlantis and stuff like that. It's all about this destruction and this like flooding and everything. So that's an interesting connection there as well. But when they come out of the ice, they're bound to meet up with the rest of the world that has been like thousands of years stunted compared to them, because they were trapped under the ice for so long.
And when they come out the ice, I think this is kind of when we get the gods idea, the Greek gods, and
the Nephilim,
the Anunnaki and all these other different types of gods idea, because I think at that time they were maybe even a little later, they were starting to go around and trying to re-civilize these civilizations because there was a catastrophe that wiped everything out.
Right.
But I think there's probably lots of different catastrophes, so I couldn't say exactly which one. But they didn't come out until like the Younger Dryas, basically that time melted the ice or broke the ice apart, depending upon where you go with either comet impact or just climate change. However you want to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
So were they just like in an area that wasn't covered in a glacier, or were they like under this glacier somehow in like a cavern?
You'd picture basically an entire area that was surrounded by a mile-high glacier in every direction, but that was staying
like outside the ice.
And we're talking about like, I mean, if you think about the size of the actual physical city of Helsinki and go a little further than that, because you have to include some of the islands that are south of it that are included in the story as well. We're talking about a massive area. So it's like, picture Game of Thrones, like you see the fucking wall of ice and it just keeps going and you don't see the South Castle or anything like that because it's so far away. It's a big area and it's just it's the Arctic, so it's really cold. We know what it's like in Iceland and Finland and Norway and places like that. It's that climate basically, where outside of it, or probably worse than what it is now, of course, but like it was just remaining habitable, not necessarily paradise at all anymore. So things changed, like in their fertility rights and their systems changed, but they still mirrored what they were trying to do before and everything. But it's an interesting story.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was exactly what I was thinking. I was trying to wrap my head around like the losing of the melanin and stuff, and then basically creating white people and everything else. It's like, but if it was a tropical paradise, and that's kind of what I had in my head. But yeah, if you picture like an Iceland sort of a thing, it's just like, okay, so habitable, but not like, you know, hey, let's go hit the beach, you know.
No, they do kind of claim that that's what it was in paradise time before, you know, before the tilt happens and everything. But once this ice age happens, it's the setup, at least, maybe not now, but like, you know, it's the setup for what Scandinavia is kind of like now, I would say. You know, probably worse though.
So you mentioned fertility rites, and I heard you guys talk about this on Tinfoil Hat. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the offer ring system, and it's all tied into the language and everything. There's so many angles to come at it, like just the simple idea that our entire language, every language, all of our alphabets, and keep in mind that this ringed like letter system that they call the root language, this alphabet is called Alfernes Betten. So it's like very close to Germanic already and modern English. And it means the rhyme of the Allfather or the rhyme of elves. So that's interesting too.
I have the book here. I have the whole alphabet. I could go into that if you really wanted me to.
Yeah, we could.
I would like to do
Jeff,
that, but it was
the
fertility.
Yeah, so the offer rate, so the idea that every single letter that we know is comprised of either a whole or a part of a ring or a pole. It's all lines and poles. And quite literally, the saga takes it to the level where this is like the most simple part of the story too, because it all starts with sex. It's all about literally the rod and the hole and all that. It's the symbolism of that entirely. And
ones and zeros.
Yeah, bingo. That's a great example. Also, it's so the fertility rites. It's kind of like, think of how we look at like the blood rites that a lot of like evil cults are doing these days. It's almost like there was an inversion of that, or the blood rites are an inversion of what it used to be, which was semen. And the semen was like the seed of God that was being like nurtured and produced by the energy of the sun into the human being. So this seed was paramount, and it was the sun. It was the energy. It was everything.
Yeah, I can get into this stuff.
So
I know this part really well. The sun was the soul. So Udinma was the sun and the soul. I was trying to find that poem. That's what I'm doing, looking through the book.
Which is interesting because we name our son Soul.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. So what they say is that
why change it, right?
The sun is what gives us our soul, and that goes into our sperm. So what they wanted to do is try to keep that soul whole with the wheel, the devil, that devil wheel. It's the wholeness of keeping that all together. So they created these caste systems, which was like a way for the procreation system, because the last son was not able, the last caste system male was not able to procreate because he was too far out of like the soul container, because they didn't want it to like dwindle down too much and get diluted. So they made it so that there's these caste systems, so that way it all goes back towards the center again, and it stays strong. And so they had like,
it's kind of hard to
so it's like selective breeding. Basically, they were only breeding like the strongest males with, you know.
Yeah, and they were keeping that same seed. They want basically keeping it in the family, but not really. It wasn't like direct incest or anything like we see. Again, we see a lot of that kind of shit today, but this was more like a mathematical setup from caste to caste to caste. And then, as Dan said, at the end of the caste systems in that ring system, it would like kind of recycle back through.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are into Bock Saga that still can't completely swallow, no pun intended, what this ritual is at least being claimed as by the originators of the story, which is a lot of fellatio, a lot of sexual rites like that, of taking in the seed and everything yourself, making it stronger and stronger. Things like that. They can also relate it to other traditions around the world that are less direct and physical of that metaphor. Or maybe, should I say, like the other cultures are more metaphoric with it, where it's like semen retention, but it's still the same idea. And Bock Saga claims that all those cultures originally came from this one breeding system. So it's kind of that idea, holding on to this seed and making it stronger. It's a lot to swallow.
Well, I mean, it makes sense if you really think about, like, I mean, you could think about royal families just in the sense of the history that we're told, right? You know, all royal families, they were inbreeding,
yeah.
you know?
Well, that's why
or they were marrying
I would say that's why
other
they
royal
inbreed
families.
Now is to try to keep that seed as strong as it once was without diluting it. So they have to do it within their own like family lines, because that's the only place where that seed is available or left.
That just seems backwards to me.
Which part?
The whole inbreeding part.
Well, yeah. It definitely is.
I think we're talking about
I understand the point that it's trying to make, but like it just seems backwards to me.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays you
with
get
the
like
whole-
all kinds of messed up stuff when you start doing that, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
this also starts to
exactly.
expose, when you start to look into this and what it's really saying, you start to see like big archetypes start popping up too. You start seeing this like keep it enclosed, like the closed off society versus a wide open one with no rules. You see a lot of like old control versus like new age Luciferian wild spirit shit. You know, it's very like contrasty there. And we kind of relate a lot. Dan and I talk deep about like certain parts of history that relate to this, and talk about like certain members of the saga in the family, which we can kind of consider lines. We can't really think it's like an individual, but lines of families moving in a certain direction. We're equating to things like the fall, you know, of Lucifer. We're talking about like a member of the Bock Saga leaving the old way behind and kind of like hubris, thinking himself to be the king when he wasn't. And this leads into like Egyptian stories of Ra, the sun king, because in the Bock Saga, the firstborn son is Ra, but it represents the moon, not the sun. So there's a lot of inversion going on. There's a lot of connection from this Finnish mythology right through to these other parts of history as well.
So, okay. So, and I think I said this when we recorded the first time, but from my understanding, it seems like this probably much older, or at least much more sophisticated civilization, right? When they come out and see the rest of the world, they pass on a lot of this knowledge, right? And that's why we see a lot of the same rituals and the languages and everything can kind of be tied back to this. But the reason that things are kind of flipped and inverted and perverted, do you think that maybe that was done on purpose when the information was being given
That's
to the
the
rest of
third
the schmucks?
Ragnarok. Yeah, that's what they call the third Ragnarok, the third great destruction. So the first two were natural disasters, as we've described. The third one is man-made. This is when, in the story, the Catholic Church has been, you know, dominating the entire area and completely destroying all remnants of heathenism and paganism. And at the very core of it is this Bock line, this Bockstrom line of people from the Aesir that hold on to the original knowledge. And they hold on to it in a physical place that's still located today in Sippo, Finland, called the Lemminkainen Temple. This character of Lemminkainen is a character that exists in accepted Finnish folklore. Eeyore Bock, in the 80s, when he released the Bock Saga, he's showing how this is possibly a hidden part of Finnish folklore that isn't written about, or it's just like the little missing pieces of it in a way.
So interesting, dude. And it's interesting to think that maybe that information was given to the rest of the schmucks wrong.
Oh yeah, so the Catholics, right? So the papal army comes in to Uudenmaa, which isn't even called Finland yet. Like it's a very difficult area of history and geography to find information on. It's almost like you're trying to prove negatives. Like, mainstream historians will say there's no way a papal army was there destroying some heathen group that you're talking about, because they can't prove that a papal army wasn't there. They can just prove other areas where they were. So it's like not likely to them. But then 8 years later, I think it's only 8 years later, accepted history puts a lot of context into this idea that Finland was destroyed. This Helsinki area was decimated. And that's how the saga goes, that the Catholics came in and destroyed everybody and burned it to the ground. And in the documentaries available on YouTube from the late Jim Chesner, who is very close to the Bock Saga, he takes you to these places in modern day Finland and shows like, they'll either be like a Catholic Christian monolith or celebratory statue on these old heathen grounds. It's like a real mockery, of course, hidden in plain sight. Or it's even an ode to the old heathen ways. That seems to be even more of a mockery because, of course, it's a place of like cover up and destruction of these people.
Yeah, kind of like we're going to tear your stuff down and build our stuff on top of it. Neater. What are you going to do about it? Yeah.
We'll even give you a trophy and have you wave to everybody, make them think that you got out. You know what I mean? Sometimes there'll be a heathen, like a Viking statue or something that he points to. Oh yeah, well, this story is not true, but behind this story is actually what really happened, and it's even worse. It's pretty crazy.
So wild, dude. And I think I mentioned the last time too, the Electric Universe. Did you guys ever go check out the Thunderbolts project and the Electric Universe?
Absolutely, yeah. Those
dude,
guys
like
are awesome.
Getting into that shit changed my perspective on so many things, man. And so it's like when you say things like, oh, this was before the Earth's tilt in this golden age, right?
Right.
That, like, I have no problem understanding what that means because of the Electric Universe and the Thunderbolts project and how they've laid out their videos explaining what that meant, and it's like,
yeah,
I truly believe there was a golden age going back, who knows, 1 million years or something, right? And like that's when we were probably at our peak, consciously and probably technologically as well. So
have you ever like taken Electric Universe and matched it up with like the principles of alchemy? That's a fun talk. That's something fun to get into for sure.
Somebody I talked to, Chance Garden from Interverse, we talked about that some, but yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's wild stuff, dude.
We just talked to Tess Clark, and she does Electric Universe stuff and like Saturnian cosmology and everything. And at the end of the interview, after we were done recording, I asked her if she had ever heard of the Bock Saga. And she's like, yeah, I have actually. And actually, if you look at the Bock Saga, the timeline in the Bock Saga actually coincides really well with the timeline of the Electric Universe and the stuff that I have put together on my website. So there's another person like outside of that that's also kind of confirming the timeline of how things happen in the world too, from a like a cosmological perspective rather than historical.
I have some exciting news too about like an outside source. I have a friend who is a professional in remote viewing, and she's pretty well esteemed in the community of remote viewing, and she teaches, and she has a bunch of students. And I told her about the saga because she's very fascinated by fairy tales and folklore. And the thing with fairy tales is it's about fair people. It's about these people, this old history that's been relegated to fiction and fairy tales. So we don't believe any of it. And so I got into it with her, and she was fascinated by it. She was picking up on a lot of different pieces of it. And so we decided that this part of the story about Lemminkainen Temple should possibly be her student's next target. So we're going to find out possibly if there is a massive treasure of this old world inside this area of Finland in this rock formation. So
do you think that we would even
get to entirely, but it's kind of like after they knew the Catholics were coming, the Bocks were able to hide and like kind of destroy the front entrance or something, kind of completely decimate the opening to the Lemminkainen temple. And it was, supposed to remain closed and hidden for 1,000 years.
Do you think that we would even know, like, if, let's say, the team, whoever it is out there, and they get in there and it's just something wild, bro, like, just, I don't know, it's some Indiana Jones artifact that's like glowing, whatever it is, like, do you think we would even know? Like, would they tell us?
Like, as in, would the information get to us?
Right.
I'll spread it around because we talked to those guys.
I don't know. I just like maybe it's my own bias.
And Jeff, there's over, I believe this summer there was over 2,500 volunteers that were headed to Lemminkainen. All these self-proclaimed Bockists heading there to help dig and help excavate this place.
Well, I guess in my mind, it's like the same with any other kind of dig, right? You find something wild, and then all of a sudden, like, the suits come in.
Maybe.
Soup, yeah.
They're like, here.
Well, that's another theory
out.
that Dan and I have talked about like.
That's kind of what happened last time. Is they all got in trouble for hashish and drugs, and they had to stop digging because they are all going through all kinds of other trials and law problems, and so it never ended up getting done. But the temple is on like property of somebody that they know. I think it's
on Eeyore's property. It's on Eeyore Bock's property.
I thought it got bought by
his
somebody
family's
else,
property,
though,
and it was confiscated. Like, yeah, it did. They know the guy, but he's lenient about the digging. But yeah, it was once his family's from what Eeyore said, it was in his family for, of course, ever, but generations known to accepted Finnish history, and that he does kind of come from royalty.
Yeah, so it's on private property. So technically, they shouldn't have any problems with red tape or anything like that. They should be able to do what they want to there.
Dude, that'd be so crazy to find like a tomb or a temple. Just find some stash of like ancient, like pre-cataclysmic civilization stuff.
That's what this might be.
Yeah.
Dude,
but also, Dan and I have been thinking about a theory. I think, Dan, you're the one who brought it up to me originally, that like the idea that what if all the amazing, quote unquote, gems from antiquity and all the statues and the carvings and all the gold, all the things we already see that have all this symbolism that is secretly related directly to Bock Saga, but it's accepted by, the Babylonian history and all these other cultures. We just associate it there, no problem.
Yeah.
But it's actually all the treasure that was once in Lemminkainen, and that it's actually already been raided, and that we've just grown up, all of us, looking at actually, pre-destruction antiquity items without even knowing it. And just unfortunately attributing it to whoever they want us to attribute it to.
Yeah, I've kind of reformed that idea, and I think maybe there was just artifacts outside of Lemminkainen that they didn't necessarily put in there, or stuff that they hid or buried, and that all
and spread to other cultures too and other areas
is still in there. And I think that's where we get like these stories of like King Arthur and the enchanted swords and like these different relics and different types of weaponry, because there seemed to be like a higher class of weaponry that they're finding in the Middle Ages that's like way too good for what they're supposed to be able to have at the time. So it's almost like they're finding these relics or whatever from a lost time before them that was of a higher civilization, and then it comes to them in some other, the Lady in the Lake or some other type of way where they're able to get in touch with these weapons, and then all of a sudden they have this enormous amount of power because they're able to wield these weapons that other people can't stop.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, if you look at the Egyptian beards on the golden sarcophagus, it's like that's a Bock beard right there. That's the northern beard. Same with the Anunnaki and the Tuatha De Danann from Ireland. All these shiny white beings with blue eyes and blonde hair. They all have these traits.
The shining ones, yeah.
Shining ones in the Hopi prophecy. Yeah.
I heard this theory once that we are Atlantis, like the Earth is Atlantis, and we just, with time, we've lost our history and we've just retold our history. Now we think our history is just fairy tales. And when you said that, what if the temple was already raided and we've grown up with that history in the Babylonian already, and whatever that may be, that's what that reminded me of. And I'm like, it just kind of dawned on me, like, whoa, exactly. It's exactly that. We've just kind of lost everything in translation there.
Yeah, and there's like the hero's journey thing, right? I mean, we're always telling the same hero stories over and over and over again. And it's kind of like gets into the fractal geometry of how psychedelic this place is. Everything's just fractal.
Yeah, I think there's a saying about like only 12 stories have ever been told. They've just been told different ways with different characters, but it's like the same 12 stories and going back to before stories were a thing. You know what I mean? It's like,
and they can all just be related, with a mirror image back to like self-discovery most of the time.
Yeah, this is very reminiscent, Jeff, of the Atlantis episode that you did, where basically I think we were trying to get Jeremy on board with the idea that Atlantis was like everything, right? And that all these cultures belonged to Atlantis. And so it was like we kind of used the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire controlled most of, the world at the time, right? The civilized world. But you had Israel, and you had India, and you had all these other areas that were just all mixed up in there, but they're all the Roman Empire. So the Romans had their influence in everything. You would see whatever you would say was exclusively like, oh, this was this area's art and their culture and all sorts of stuff. Yes, that may have been, but it was also Roman influenced because they had that whole area under control. And so I like that this is kind of tying into all that. What, Jeff, what you were really pushing on was that, you're seeing the Babylonians, and you're seeing the Assyrians, and you're seeing all these different groups, and you're seeing, all of their own personalized style. But who's to say that style wasn't influenced or didn't first belong to this other group, that it was basically everybody at the time.
Yeah, it's like a backstory.
Kind of disseminated down, right?
It doesn't really like fuck with anybody's individual cultural theories. It kind of just gives an absolute distant past backdrop to it all.
Right.
That's what a lot of people, at first it's like attacking exactly what we believe or everything we believe, even about our language. But then once you start to really understand, it's like, all right, this is just piecing everything together in an interesting way and connecting to different parts of the world. And okay, that doesn't necessarily take away from what cultures in, 9000 BC were thinking, because this is eons after the saga. My interpretation of these cultural and symbolic carryover from the old saga times to what we're talking about with Babylon and all of Mesopotamia and everything like that, all the symbols being the same. I think a lot of it is because we don't have cultures that exist for more than a couple hundred years anymore. We have cultures that rise and fall constantly, right? And back then, hypothetically, this was a culture that was existing for millions and millions of years, uninterrupted, again, in this if it works, don't break it kind of old way. It just went around in a circle over and over and over again. I think, personally, it would take that kind of time period to create muscle memory in us, where we're regurgitating these same stories or regurgitating these same symbols. We may have picked up absolutely meaningful reason to justify the symbols on our own cultural accord, irregardless of what they meant originally. So that's kind of my explanation as to why the saga doesn't necessarily have to mess with anybody's other theories, because we're talking about history that's hypothetically millions of years before all of our ancient alien stories anyway. You know what I mean?
It's so
I mean, not
wild,
just
dude.
that,
You
that
know,
was just an example.
this makes me think of like, I don't know. I have this weird fascination with like old fantasy stuff, right? So like Lord of the Rings, for instance.
Hell yeah.
You know, and I like to
Yeah.
Lord
I
of the
like to
Ringlands.
think, right? You know, or like, did you guys play Skyrim?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Everybody played Skyrim, right? So
Yeah.
I heard this
lost a year of
theory,
my
and maybe
life
it's
for that.
true, that apparently Skyrim and Fallout are in the same universe, right? And that from what I understand, Skyrim is after Fallout. So like after the nukes and all the radiation, then thousands of years later, people had like magic powers. They were living like with swords and shit. But like this kind of thing makes me think about this stuff, right? Or like how I was thinking about Lord of the Rings. I always like to imagine that Middle Earth was a real place at a point in time in past where there was elves and fucking hobbits and
Midgard.
magic
Yeah.
and all this shit, right? And then that all gets lost with millions of years. But
Yeah.
that's what this makes me
Well,
think of. Like we're talking about
Tolkien
the Bock Saga, and I'm
If you-
thinking Middle Earth.
makes me
I
think of
know,
never
like-
ending story and shit. But then
That
like
too.
was gonna
Tolkien was
say-
obsessed with Finnish grammar and shit. Go ahead.
If you
Dan.
look at like evolutionary charts of humans, which some people might not agree with, but they have found like Homo florensis and like Denisovans and all these different types of groups of people. And the farther you go back from Homo sapien, the more and more like animalistic they start to look. And I think when you go back millions of years to this kind of time period, you can kind of see how elves and dwarfs could have had these types of look to them and evolved to the point where they're more human Homo sapien looking now. And so that kind of brings that together a little bit.
Yeah, like the elongated skulls that many have discovered and talked about. Like we can't discount that. Like I discount Ancient Aliens to this Bock Saga story all the time, but the elongated skulls are really interesting, and I wonder if it does still connect back to that time period, and we were just different. Maybe these strongest and biggest that were being bred really resembled like tall grays or something, or these white Nordic aliens that the Bird Diary talks about and shit.
You know, that's super interesting. I want to try to connect that because
Let's do it.
when you get into like ufology and all the different races of aliens, and we made deals and all this shit, the tall Nordic beings are always in the list of beings, right? Go pick a
Thor
YouTube
hired
video of like, here's all the extraterrestrial. Yeah, the Nordics are definitely a thing, right? So thinking about like this advanced civilization emerging from this place, right, that's been cut off for, call it 100,000 years, right?
Millions,
And
supposedly.
millions of years, right? They've been
entire
there
length
for
of an ice age.
so long, so advanced, and they come out, and then all the other people on the planet, right, or plane or whatever, they see these white people. They've never seen white people, right? The shining ones that they see,
Mhm.
and then like I talked about this last time, right? The man bag that we see on all the reliefs and carvings, right? Where
Yeah.
these beings that came, right, had this man bag, which Graham Hancock and other people say like that must be a symbol for the knowledge somehow, because this is when agriculture came. This is when math started showing up. This is when
Mhm.
all these things started popping up, and it's like, dude, you know, I don't know, man. And you know what's funny is last time I said somebody should make a movie out of this, and then I went and looked, and there's like a bunch. I don't know if they're any
This-
good. I haven't watched any.
Lord of the
But-
Rings is
I'm thinking-
about this.
I'm
What are the
thinking about
movies?
Egyptian carvings and whatnot, like the pharaohs with dog heads and everything. You said that they looked more
Dogs.
animalistic and everything.
Yeah.
Well, in the Bock Saga, the biggest hard to swallow is the origin story about ape and goat
Go
being our origin,
Pan.
and the goat symbolism. Oh, the goat symbolism.
So who did that?
Who did what?
Well, if our origin is between, yeah, like who spliced the genes, I guess.
Well, no,
So-
that's an interesting take. I mean, we usually don't. The Bock Saga doesn't claim that at all. Dan explains it pretty well, just by like a necessity almost of like nature or something,
Yeah, it's
like a
a
desperation
necessity of
for
nature.
possibly consciousness.
Yeah, because
to get through. I don't know, but
most things on the world were wiped out. So you get to a point where there's only a few things left, and they had to repopulate. Normally, a goat and an ape couldn't procreate and have kids together. So punny, but in this instance, they were able to because it was a necessity to keep life going. So life always finds a way to keep existing. And at this time, there wasn't very much life left, and they had to exist. So they had to procreate in order to have
so
life. Yeah.
that's not like the sagas, and like the saga kind of does it in this very holy way where it's like the sun, you know, kind of directed this to happen, and it was in this one exact place in the North Pole where the literal vortex is at the North Pole, in this hole where it was this conception. And this is where the two original humans came out, named Frey and Freya.
Yeah.
And this is why it's whole E, because the E, which is a lowercase I in our language, is a symbol of the pole and the North Star above. So it's the whole E, and it's the Holy Land. It's really weird.
That's why there's like two stories of like creation too, like in the Bible, right? There you have your normal story, which was God created everything, and then on the sixth day humans. But then later, then you get your Adam and Eve story, because afterwards they had to start over again with the goat and the ape, and then that created the Frey and Freya, the Adam and the Eve, and then life
It's
continued.
so wild that you said that about the sun, Andy, because while Dan was talking before that, I was thinking to myself, like, I wonder if, you know, one of the cataclysms in the back in the day was like some kind of solar flare or something, right? And this uptick of radiation from the sun, something like that. And then you were like, oh, they said that the sun made this change happen. And I'm like,
yeah, like it was destined to happen through Udin, right? It's a very mythological story the way they put it. So I mean, this is the big who knows, right?
But there could be a scientific explanation, is what I'm saying, right? Like, we know that the sun can cause evolutionary adaptations and things, right? So like, it's possible.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible that especially if we're in some kind of crazy alignment with other celestial bodies, who knows what kind of, you know, electromagnetic energies we're getting down here, plus some solar rays of something, and then boom, the DNA shifts, and the goat and the monkey are able to bone.
It's also, I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys on take one, but my weird theory about how when you look at the groups that are possibly in the know on like our ancient history and what all the symbols might actually really mean, it's almost like you can kind of put it down to a duality of sorts. And looking at the prevalent scientific model is that we come from apes. And it's interesting that that's not a straight, if you look at saga as if it's the hidden history, it's not a total lie that takes away from the hidden history, but it's missing one half. And it's an important half to be missing because it's the goat. It's the most suppressed part of history, along with all of the heathenism that goes along with the symbol of the goat. And it's the most demonized as well. So it would be hypothetically kind of interesting if it was true, and this would follow suit in their whole philosophy of destruction of that worldview and hiding it forever, and like only maintaining one side of the story. It would be interesting, but that's just a hypothetical.
This shit fascinates me, dude. And to think that like all of our civilization is rooted in this, you know, much more ancient civilization, and we're just like doing it wrong. You know what I mean? It's like we got little snippets of like how to do shit, and we're just doing it wrong. And they had it right.
It's not just the saga doing it either. There's a lot of etymologists that will concur about the phonetic roots of things and how it's really the sound of letters themselves and where you can trace them back to. And that's kind of how you find the real roots. And it's not at all what, you know, what's accepted history will tell you, you know, of where we were. You know, it tells a much different tale, it seems.
What's the best? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say as like you mentioned last time, like a lot of our current words are like little play on old, like different words. Like, I can't remember what you said in the first take, but like earlier you said fairy tales. I wrote it down here. I find that so very interesting, and like now I'm listening very carefully for like different
now start
sorts
looking
of
through
words that, like,
mythology.
you
Look
could
at Irish
play with.
mythology and Scythian, and like just follow it all along, and you find all of these characters with bright blonde hair and all these very Viking looking or pre-Viking kind of looking
There's also
attire in the mythology.
Holy Land, holy, the whole.
Yeah, that was
and the
another one.
E.
Holy,
Yeah.
Ball and lance, bow lance.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's like English is supposed to be much more recent. So it almost feels intentional, right? I was actually just saying this to Andreas Exertus earlier, that it feels intentional, where like English is like purposely hiding secrets for people to find. But I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know if it's coded in that way, or if some other force is kind of, it's almost like an intention has to get through regardless. I don't know. It's absolutely perplexing to me how it has occurred. But English is clearly coded in some way or disrupted, and it is tied to this third Ragnarok where the Catholics destroy everything, it seems, where the language has completely been decimated, this root language.
If that was true, then it would make sense as to why English is the dominant language on Earth. I mean, like I spent 8 months in South Korea. They teach English the way that, you know, our schools teach Spanish and stuff, but it's like everyone that's young there knows at least enough English to get by. All these other countries know English and stuff. You know, when trade deals go on, you know, around the world, they're usually done in English, right? Or at least, you know, some of it. And so it's like, and then also now, I mean, I wonder if there has anything to do with this whole, like, it seems like a huge effort to like change the definitions of what these like current words mean and stuff like that, right? Is there,
bingo,
you know?
Yeah, because I mean, we're talking about an oral story that is supposedly passed down from generation to generation. It takes 20 years for the person to really grasp it all in their heads, for root language to start kicking in their head. And this is what Eeyore Bock did and all of his predecessors. So we're talking about, as soon as it hits paper, these words and letters can break off from the original sound they're attached to. Pronunciation starts to blur the lines, and suddenly the story doesn't make sense anymore. So it falls apart right there. So whether by coercion or not.
It's kind of like what I said last time with, it reminded me of a show. Buddy wrote chameleon down on the board, but then when he said it out loud, he said chameleon. It's so easy to take a written word and interpret it a different way. And instead of getting chameleon, you get chameleon.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that human beings have unfortunately done this. This is like the epic game of telephone we've all been playing through disasters and rises and falls of empires and this and that as language changes. But this one seems to be really particular with all the inversions and everything. And that's what the parasite class is kind of known for anyway, is this inversion. But then we go even further, we find out that inversion itself was a way for even the good guys to pass messages to each other to not get found out. It's interesting how the further you go into the Bock Saga, this line between the good and bad guys kind of seems to dismantle, at least with the words and the terminologies as we understand them. Like Dan said in the beginning, the wheel, Davil. Say it like a German person. Davil is devil, you know, but it's not even talking about an individual. It was actually a totally different concept, according to these old languages. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And then there's also
personalized so many things.
Immune system.
Oh, the immune system, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you're getting health by drinking your own cum. The mouth is the moon shape.
I want to break down the English language so badly now.
Start with Gallagher
This
with the
is
fucking water.
so wild.
Well, they say that English is a derivative of this root language. It came out of that. And what Yake said is
Chesner
that
says
English,
it's bastardization.
English was from the root, but it's also mixed with some other type of language. Yake said he wasn't really sure. Well, but Vonner could be all the
Chesner
different
says it's Vonner and root
combined.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, man.
Yeah, so then the English language is combined with another one, so that's why you still get some of these same meanings behind it, but then also you get like different ones too, because the two languages combined make the English. And if you look at English, it's Angle, the Angle land, the England. It's the angel language, so it's the language of the angels. And then this kind of even goes back into like rune stones, and then Odin hanging from the world tree upside down to see the runes. The runes were already in existence, and he plucked them from whatever by giving his eye away. And so you have this idea of him finding this language and giving it to mankind, and then Babylon being, or is that when the language got changed, the Tower of Babel? So they were able to put pen to paper. Then it started to mess with the meanings and pronunciations, and then that's when everything kind of changed. But you have this connection with, like, I have a book about angels, and in it is the angel language, and it looks just like fucking runestones.
It's interesting you said that, because I was literally thinking that maybe the Tower of Babel story is like a story about this, like when the story went from being oral to written, and everything just got fucked.
Yeah. Also, like when we think about God being the one that like breaks the tower, you got to think the Catholic Church was standing in place of God, which from the heathen point of view was a word that meant gut or good, like good within is your gut, intuition, intention. So that was externalized through this Catholic changing. It was like a hijacking of this internal experience we all have and externalizing it.
Well, I'd say the Tower of Babel was way before Catholicism, because it was pre-flood.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't make sense, Andy. But
well, it would have been post-flood, but way before Catholicism. Catholicism came around from Emperor Constantine,
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, way before.
Yeah.
But still, yeah.
Super interesting, man.
That is, it's an interesting point. It's like we do see in the Bock Saga this absolute demolishing of of everything heathen. It would be the proper place to put that allegory. But I mean, what do you guys think? What would have gone? Because I've thought about that too. It would have had to have happened. Probably, we're also probably describing some sort of natural process, a game of telephone again, in some ways. So I don't know. It might have been taken eons through natural disasters for this to happen.
So the first written language that they found was like the Astraharis or Enuma Elish from Sumeria. But I looked into some. I was chasing down the tribe of Dan, and I found that they're on Ancient Origins website. They had talked about, they found an ancient script writing in near the Black Sea, and they believe that this writing wasn't typically used. It wasn't used for trade and barter like writing typically was used for. They said that it had more of like symbolic nature to it, and it looked like it was used for magic or incantations. And so that maybe the reason why the writing existed in the first place was to make spells. And so that's where we get spelling from. I mean, a lot of people have heard that before already, but but the idea that the reason why they first started putting things on paper was to do incantations and spells and do magic is pretty interesting and provocative. And then that whole thing ties into what they called the Danube River Valley civilization, which was around the Black Sea area, and this predated the Sumerian history by 2,000 to 3,000 years. So looking at around 5,000 to 4,000 BC. So that's a pretty long time ago. So, I mean, that could really kind of be in part where the Tower of Babel story could have been, because it was that long ago. So,
That's true. Either way, it's like
Interesting,
we're
dude.
recovering a living language or something, because the more we look into how this root language is set up, the more we can kind of connect it to other motifs in history and different time periods and see not how these humans may have intentionally or knowledgeably were connecting it, but just how it's possibly even just naturally happening throughout our history. We're connecting to these same motifs over and over again.
That's wild. The first writings used for spells, and that's why we have the word spelling.
Right.
I'm just putting two and two together.
That's
But
just
man.
so.
a lot of people talk about like
It's so obvious to
spelling
me.
and curse words and all that kind of stuff. It comes up often. So I was just putting it a little bit more into
Yeah.
perspective from like actual stuff that they have found historically that might actually
Oh no,
corroborate
like I
that.
got it. Like it was just
Yeah.
yeah, I
It
got
just
it.
seems so
Like
obvious.
how you just kind of like throwing it around in my head, like, you know, we call it spelling, right? That's how we spell things. And
Yeah.
originally made up for casting spells, right? So I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know, two and two together in my head. I was like, that's
If you
funny.
look
And
at
you
a
think
lot of
about,
like
like,
the
our-
old, a lot of the old manuscripts were like about like spelling and stuff. Like, what's that big old book that they found that's all fucking creepy and evil looking and it's just full of like
what, the Codex
weird.
Gigas?
I don't know, dude. Is that what it's called? I
don't
don't
know.
think it's called that. The Codex
It's
Gigas?
supposedly the Devil's Bible.
Yeah, the
Codex
Devil's
Gigas
Bible.
is the Devil's Bible. It's like
Yeah.
3 feet by
What?
2 feet.
Yes.
It's fucking huge.
Yes.
There's a
Devil's
whole
Bible?
mythology around that.
I'm gonna
too,
look it
yeah.
up. All right.
It's pretty intense. You guys could do a whole.
Is
whole
it made
series
out of
on-
human skin? Like
No,
I
it's a
don't
guy
know.
that was like
Could be.
did wrong by the papacy or something like that, and instead of killing him, they allowed him to like write a book that would like include all of the histories of all the world, but he had to do it in one night to live or something like that. And he like calls upon the devil and shit. It's nuts. But then here we have this physical, ridiculous manuscript, all appearing to be in the same exact penmanship throughout the entire thing. And people say that it should have taken like 25 years to complete or some shit like that. It's pretty wild.
Hmm.
But it's, yeah.
Dude, all this shit is so wild,
Okay.
man. I wish it
Yeah.
wasn't after 11 o'clock because I totally just want to like talk about this for 5 hours.
I'm so tired.
It's not even
I
that
am
I'm
too.
tired.
that's
Seriously.
exactly what he sounds like. That's crazy.
It's just that. It's just that.
I do Jeff impressions at stand-up comedy lounges. It's pretty great. No, I'm just kidding.
That's good, man. I'm glad that it works out.
It's early for me.
Can't wait for our next Horns Up episode, brother.
right,
It's
Jake.
gonna be
Me
good.
either. I'm excited.
It's early for us.
Yeah.
So, but before we go, like, what do you think would be like the best resource to like get more info on Bock Saga?
I would say Jim Chesner's documentaries on YouTube, or the book by Carl
Jim
Borgen.
Chesner.
Yeah. Type in Jim Chesner, Chessner, and the documentaries are Welcome to Hell, Welcome to Atlantis, and Welcome to Rajasthan. And he tells all of these stories much more fluently, much more chronologically. He includes so much of history that we understand and we've heard, and just connects it all and shows you how it's related to this saga. It's nuts.
Mhm. Andy and I are not experts on the saga. Like, we've only been
No,
learning
we're
about this
fascinated.
for. I've
You
been
sound like
learning.
it.
I've been learning about it for maybe 2 years, and I think Andy's like a year now, probably.
A year and a half, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So like a lot of this stuff, like we
Just keeps
talked to
going.
Yake about, because we're unsure about things. We don't know everything in here.
No.
So, I mean, it takes a lot of learning, a lot of study to remember a lot of this stuff because it's so deep, So I also recommend the Bock Saga Introduction, the book. is because, for one, it goes through everything really well, and there's stuff in there that is not in the videos, and it's a physical copy, so you can actually see the words on paper, which helps me remember things when I actually just read it instead of hear it sometimes. So also, like, I have like tons of notes in mine, and like bookmarks freaking everywhere of all these different things. There's so many like interesting things in it. It talks about the military system and how that it was a life system, not a death system. Why it's called infantry, why it's called like military, and all these different ideas that come out of that whole thing. And it was used for this procreation system. So
Yeah,
that's
if you like
all
the
very
word magic,
fascinating.
you'll love Bock Saga.
Yeah, it also it has a lot of other different word references in it. It tells you a lot about other different things. It talks about Jerusalem being like the place where that they kind of consecrated the Lemminkainen and the swan had sex at. It was like their honeymoon palace, basically. There's so many different aspects of the saga that, like, if you just hear these basic ones, it kind of gives you a little bit of a background on like the historical aspect of it. But when you get into it and you get into these little stories and you start to see those connections with other things going on in the world and other things in history, that really starts to bring out more aspects of this together. So I definitely recommend getting the book. And there's also, I think, Bock Saga info, bocksaga.info. Is that it, Andy?
Yeah, bocksaga.info. It's run by a couple of the guys that work close with Eeyore and carry on a lot of the, like, there's a huge gallery of pictures and old videos. Everything's been converted from like VHS tapes, so a lot of it's scratchy, a lot of the audio sucks, but there are these tons of videos from 1984 all the way up to now of different interviews and different friends of Eeyore's telling the story.
I would say if you're interested, check out Jim Chesner on YouTube. Then if you're still interested, you want to learn more, get the book. Then after that, if you really want to get deeper, then start watching a lot of the videos on and listening to the audio on Bock Saga info, because then you'll get even more. But that I would say that would be my progression with it for people, especially trying to dip their toes in it, because there's a lot there, and it can be kind of overwhelming if you're not really prepared for it.
Alrighty, guys. Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties. Andy, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Where can the travelers and the listeners find you guys and get more information from your different podcasts and different things that you guys do?
Thanks for having us again for take 2. I'm glad we got it nailed down this time, man. You can find me, Andy Rouse, at the Deep Share on social media, and my podcast, the Deep Share Podcast, is on every podcast app, and you can find it on YouTube, Odyssey, Rockfin, and yeah, that's about it. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I am Danunaki Dan. I'm on Rising from the Ashes. I co-host that with the homie Romy. I also do Horns Up and the Deep Chill with Andy on our Patreon, Patreon Rising from the Ashes, and Patreon the Deep Share, if you want to catch those episodes.
Yeah, either one.
Yep. And then that's about it, man. That's where you can find me. And on Instagram, I'm on the gram.
The gram?
The gram.
Yeah.
Such a succulent voice, Dan.
I just want to say really quickly before everybody says goodbye and whatnot, Jake and I are wearing the same Bigfoot shirts.
Oh, stand up. I can't see it.
That's awesome.
Oh my God.
That's a great Bigfoot shirt.
Are you guys related? Are you?
No.
We're twins. Yeah.
We're twinning today, though.
Do you know each other in person?
No, we just sell them, and they like to wear their own merch.
Yeah.
Oh,
we're lame like that.
I'm also wearing Infinite Rabbit Hole.
I was almost going to wear that one today, so yeah.
Represent.
And I made Bigfoot into the episode, so.
Oh, that's right.
We
Thank
did
you
it.
so much.
You're
All right.
We could have gotten
We did
into
it.
Red-Headed
This is-
Giants and connected it.
Got to redo it. Take 3.
Yeah.
Take 3. Well, we'll just have you guys back on. I'm sure there's a lot more information to be covered.
We'll bring
Okay.
Jeremy on that time, and
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
pick his brain for this too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think Jeremy would really like this. He'd really dig
Oh
it.
yeah.
Can't say he'd buy it, but I think he'd really dig it.
Have him watch some videos first.
I wish we could have gone longer, man. It's too bad Jeff had to go to bed.
We're on the East Coast. We can't help where we are.
Yeah, you guys are all on the West Coast. Me and Andy are over here. It's like about to
It's
turn
getting
tomorrow.
it's
about to be
getting
tomorrow
close to my
already.
bedtime too.
About to be
It's okay,
tomorrow.
guys.
It's morrowing up in here.
Alrighty then.
Cool.
Well, then we'll call it so that Jeff stops complaining about it. Again, thank you, Dan and Andy, for coming on. This has been another episode of The Infinite Rabbit Hole. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time at the next path of The Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye.
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 Peace.
Gotta say it, Dan.
Wake up.
There we go.